From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Tuesday, July 29, 2025. Gay and trans rights lobby group Equality Australia wants the federal court to rule that women-only spaces are unlawful. The advocates are seeking to join a trans woman, Roxanne Tickle, who's locked in a legal battle with the founder of a women-only app, Giggle. That's an exclusive, live at theaustralian.com.au right now. Palestinian activists want to march across the Sydney Harbour Bridge this weekend, but New South Wales Premier Chris Minns says he won't allow it. That's as Anthony Albanese says Australia is in talks with other countries about recognition of Palestinian statehood, but warns it's only worth doing if it advances the cause of peace. Food aid is falling from the skies over Gaza as Israel pauses hostilities to allow Jordan and the United Arab Emirates to deliver humanitarian assistance. It comes amid shocking scenes of desperation and malnutrition and international condemnation of Israel. But Israel says Hamas is deliberately contributing to the suffering of Gazans. Today, Chief International Correspondent Cameron Stewart joins me to step through this complex situation and work out how it all went so wrong. Cam, we're nearly 2 years into Israel's war on Hamas, and the scenes coming out of Gaza just get more and more distressing by the day, don't they?
They certainly do. It's almost the height of, I think, the separation between a lot of the international community and Israel as far as what's happening in Gaza. It's certainly probably the most shocking scenes we've had yet in this war.
Aid agencies have been warning that mass starvation is taking hold in Gaza.
Footage released by the Israeli military showing its planes dropping 7 packages of aid into Gaza, where 2 million people are facing a hunger crisis.
Jordan says it's parachuted 25 tons of aid into Gaza. Israel says it has airdropped aid too.
Israel is presented as though we are applying a campaign of starvation in Gaza. What a bold-faced lie. There is no policy of starvation in Gaza, and there is no starvation in Gaza.
Gaza's not self-sufficient for food. It's a very small territory, of course. There's simply not enough farming land to produce the amount of food that the population would require. And so food has always had to be brought in, and it's mainly in the past come in by truck. That was previously distributed by the United Nations and private charities. And they had a huge number, hundreds of sites to distribute that aid from. Why did that system break down in the first place, Cam?
The system broke down partly because Israel was very wary of letting in too many of those trucks. They felt that Hamas was skimming and stealing a lot of that aid from the UN agencies. The UN agencies denied that, so we had a bit of a he said, she said situation there. But the Israeli military was placed quite a few restrictions on the routes that those trucks could take into Gaza, and they very carefully examined those trucks before they went in. All of this sort of stuff slowed down that delivery of aid, and effectively not enough aid was coming in to feed the population. But the main concern about it was simply that the Israelis were concerned that Hamas was stealing and profiting off this aid. This story of this escalation to the problem that we're seeing now, Claire, really began in March. And that's when Benjamin Netanyahu's government made a big decision, and a very controversial one, even though it didn't attract a lot of attention at the time, and that was to basically cut aid going into Gaza. Now, the thinking behind it from the government's point of view, the Israeli government, was they hadn't defeated Hamas militarily, but Hamas was skimming off aid supplies as they came into Gaza and then reselling that aid back to the population for a lot of money and basically using that money to help finance their war. Now, the Israelis wanted to find a way to get that to stop, and they thought that if they stopped aid coming into Gaza, then that would weaken the revenue stream for Hamas and also potentially make the population rise up against Hamas. I think they were the two assumptions that the Israeli government had. But then just about 2 months ago, the Israelis, to try and stop Hamas getting any aid coming in, decided to create a new aid system which was going to cut Hamas out as a middleman, if you like. It was called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Fairly unclear the origins of this organisation, but it is backed by the US and Israel. And what it does is there's 3 station points in Gaza, and Israeli troops are in the periphery of each of those points to prevent Hamas from taking the aid. And that has been the distribution point for about the last 2 months in Gaza. But it has not worked because it has basically failed to produce enough aid to feed the population. And the people of Gaza have to walk to these 3 places along various routes which cross Israeli lines, military lines at various points. So there's been confusion, there's been shootings, there's been deaths. And because now the hunger level in Gaza has reached extreme point, we're seeing desperate scenes of mobs of Gazans literally rioting to get whatever aid is available. Again, that has caused shooting and chaos. So it just isn't enough. It's too little, too late.
One of the complexities of Gaza, Cam, is that Hamas, the government that was elected many years ago and no elections have been held since, Hamas runs everything in Gaza. It runs the health ministry, it runs the schools. How is it possible to differentiate Hamas personnel from everybody else?
It's very difficult. And the calculation of Benjamin Netanyahu really was that, you get hunger into the territory and Hamas will lose. Well, they will be the loser from this. But Hamas has still not surrendered power, and the people of Gaza are in near starvation conditions. So that has been an assumption by Benjamin Netanyahu that simply hasn't worked.
In a way, that's also played into Hamas's hands, hasn't it, Cam? One of the goals of the October 7 attack on Israel was to precipitate a response from Israel that would galvanise world opinion against Israel. That worked. And now this has worked again to incite international revulsion about Israel.
That's true. Hamas has absolutely exploited this situation to the maximum. And, they are using this situation to highlight the fact of Gazans starving and knowing that it really is creating a huge international backlash against Israel, which of course suits Hamas, which of course is hugely hypocritical on Hamas's part, given that they actually created this entire conflict with their attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, knew that there would be a massive attack on their own people by Israel, and this is really the latest chapter in this tragedy.
There have been numerous deaths at aid sites, and Israel has said on various occasions that its forces have opened fire on people attempting to get aid. What's your sense of why those things have unfolded? Is this a case of soldiers panicking, or is there something more sinister at play?
I think it's a mixture of things. The aid distribution points have not been organised nearly as well as they should have been. There's not enough of them. There are too many Gazans who are hungry, who are trying to get to them. And also, the Israelis have been very prescriptive about the routes that the people have to walk to get to these aid centres. And if they cross military lines, often they get fired on. I think that the aid centres were set up by Israel, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, for good reasons to try and rob Hamas from stealing and taking the aid. I don't think they were set up for any worse purpose than that.
Israel denies there's any starvation in Gaza and says there's misinformation being spread by Hamas, including photographs that they say are misleading. There are also reports that one photo in particular that's been splashed on newspaper front pages around the world of an emaciated 1-year-old boy, in fact shows a child with cerebral palsy. Coming up, Hamas wants the old UN-led system back. Is that the solution? One of Hamas's demands in the talks over a ceasefire is for an end to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which they regard as an Israeli puppet, and a return to having the United Nations and other humanitarian organisations distribute aid. Do you think that's something that Israel will ever agree to?
I think that the obvious solution here, Claire, in lots of ways, is to open the valve at all levels until the hunger and the famine conditions subside, and that is basically using the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as they're doing at the moment, but also opening the valves for the old UN system of the trucks coming in. Now, the problem with that is that Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing coalition partners, the more nationalist extreme version of his coalition, are very opposed to this. They say this is rewarding Hamas because Hamas will take the aid, they will skim it, and the old problems will remain. So he's got a revolt on his side of politics against this concept of opening all the valves and just getting lots of aid into Gaza. The real danger for Benjamin Netanyahu is not just his right-wing coalition partners, but Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been increasingly frustrated with Benjamin Netanyahu and the war in Gaza, the fact that it continues on without solution. And I think these terrible images of malnourished children coming out of Gaza really makes it quite possible that Trump will lose patience with Netanyahu, and I think that is a real danger for Netanyahu in pursuing this policy.
Cameron Stewart is the Australian's chief international correspondent. You can read his reporting and analysis anytime at theaustralian.com.au.